Welcome back. All right, it is power rankings time yet again for another week. Lots of movement. There are some teams that have made dramatic moves this week, but it does feel like things are settling out a bit. At the bottom and at the top, I think we're starting to see who the best teams are and who the teams are that are probably already looking forward to next year. At number 32, dropping one spot from last week, the Anaheim Ducks. 4 wins, 10 regulation losses. Not really much else to say with the Ducks. They're getting opportunities. There's some good plays here and there. They're a team that's still in the midst of a rebuild. And so, I mean, Pat Verbeek basically told us that last year. I think he added some good players, but in essence, what he's added is players that are probably going to get moved out at the deadline. I think Klingberg's going to get moved out at the deadline. I'd be kind of surprised if he stays in Anaheim, and there's probably going to be other names as well that are going to be on their way out of town. So, Anaheim's number 32. Number 31, dropping one spot from last week, is Vancouver. I mean, the win over Ottawa was nice and all, but then they followed that up with losses against Montreal and Toronto. And they're still not holding leads. There's still bad passes being made. The goaltending's been average to poor. And just in general, it's a team that's, I would say we're already in a spot where if the general manager comes out tomorrow and says, you know what, we're just going to pull the plug and figure it out, I don't know that I could blame him at this point. I really don't know that I could. Number 30, moving up 2 spots from last week, Columbus. Now, don't let it go to your heads here, Columbus. The one thing I will say is that while they lost tonight, they did win their previous game, and they gave the Islanders a pretty good fight. Korpisalo looks like he's back to being the Jonas Korpisalo that we were all quite big fans of back in 2019, and that's good news for Columbus as well. So, for the Blue Jackets, they move up a couple of spots. Number 29, same spot as last week, San Jose Sharks. For the Sharks, I guess I've got them in the right spot. They're capable of upset wins here and there, sure, but in general, I think they're in the right spot. I think that's a good spot for them. I would put them ahead of Columbus, Vancouver, and Anaheim, and then after that, I don't see them as being ahead of teams. They're staying in games. Carlson's off to a fantastic start to the season. I just don't think they have enough to keep it going. Number 28, dropping 7 spots from last week, is St. Louis. Now, they've won back-to-back games. Yes, they actually defeated Vegas in Vegas tonight. And that's after beating San Jose. But San Jose's here, and the win over Vegas is great. I want to see how they do this week before I start moving them back up. They've won 2 in a row after losing 8 in a row. They lost 8 in a row after winning 3 in a row. So that means they should win their next game too, right? This is the pattern that they're showing this year. So let's see, 3-game winning streak, 8-game losing streak. So 13-game winning streak then, and then an 18-game losing streak. I don't know. We'll see. But the Blues, I'm not moving them up until I see more from them over the next week or so. Number 27, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Nashville. It's been an up and down fight for Nashville. They did win tonight. They did beat the New York Rangers, which prevented them from dropping below St. Louis. But they're winning enough games to stay near 500, but they're losing enough games to stay below 500. And so for Nashville, I think they're in the right spot at 27th. I do. I think that's the good spot for them. Actually, this was one week where I really didn't mess around with the standings at the end of the week. I didn't say, oh, this team's way too low and this team's too high. No, it didn't happen. I just looked at the board and went, yep. And so we're at that point of the year where I just look and go, yeah, that's fine. Knowing people are going to get mad, but that's fine too. Number 26, dropping 3 spots from last week, is Ottawa. For the Sens, they did beat Philadelphia. They lost against Vancouver. Very up and down week for them. And so they end up going down a bit because they lost so many games before that win over Philadelphia. And so we'll see whether or not Ottawa can drag themselves back into the hunt. But it's tough. It's already at a spot where it's tough to get back into the race. Even though one of the teams to be chasing down is Montreal, who should fall off the pace, right? They're going to fall off. I mean, they should. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's going to fool us all. Number 25, a team that's fooling us all as well and moved up 3 spots this week, the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes, they are a hardworking team. They're playing their system. They're playing well. Clayton Keller's playing some of the best hockey he ever has in his career. And honestly, they're entertaining to watch now. I don't know what's happened there, but whatever they're doing is working. And Arizona moves up 3 spots. Even though they're on a 14-game road trip, you would think they'd be moving down. They're not. They're ready to move into the next row. Speaking of next row, moving up 1 spot from last week to 24 is the Washington Capitals. So for the Caps, a better week, I think, than they've had in the last couple. We'll see if they can follow that up with another good one. But, I mean, they lost against Pittsburgh. That was a bit of a tough setback for them. And just in general, Washington is a team as well that sits below the playoff line, and I do wonder if they're going to get there. Maybe they can. I mean, they've got the goaltender in Kemper that should be able to get them to the playoffs. Carlson's come back. They should start getting healthier. That should absolutely help. Number 23, and what a drop. Moving down 16 spots. And I didn't want to do this, but I really looked at the board before today's games. And I thought, okay, if this game goes south, I can't keep them up. And it's Buffalo. Buffalo has lost 5 in a row now. And their competition has been tough, yes, but they're below 500. And I mean, yeah, they could have won that game today over Boston. They didn't. And so I don't know what else to do with Buffalo. They have to drop. It's basically, I mean, while the standings don't tell you everything, yeah, they've lost 5 in a row. They drop. And so for Buffalo, we'll see if they can pull themselves out of this. I really want them to, because as a Canuck fan, I'm not getting any joy in Vancouver. It would be great if Buffalo could put together a good season to make the playoffs. So believe me, I do want Buffalo to turn it around. Number 22, dropping 3 spots from last week. They won today, but Chicago won over Anaheim. And again, I've mentioned this in recent last couple weeks too, Chicago's hanging around far longer than we thought they would. They're going to probably fall off the pace enough that they won't be talked about as being in the hunt for the playoffs, but they haven't yet. And with the West being as mediocre as teams' records are, they're still in the hunt. So as long as they're getting overtime loss points, as long as they're sticking around and getting the occasional victory, they're keeping things interesting. And Soderblom was fantastic tonight. So while they drop a few spots, they don't drop nearly as far as we would have thought they would have before the season started. Number 21, moving up 6 spots from last week, Montreal. Yeah, moving up 6 spots. They're right back up into this row. And I really thought last week, I thought, okay, Montreal, now they're falling off the pace. They're below 500. Well, now they're 2 games above 500. Last year, they had 0 days above 500. Tomorrow will be their 11th day above 500 this year. And that's huge. And seeing Suzuki playing so well and Caulfield playing so well is great, because I never once wavered in my support for those players. I never said, oh, no, I'm sorry, Caulfield's bust. I never once said, you know what, you're right, Suzuki's mediocre. I've always said Suzuki's a fantastic two-way forward, and those two guys together just have great chemistry. So, and now with Doc added to that line, it is possible, if Montreal can get that depth scoring, and if that blue line's good, it is possible Montreal stays in the hunt and ends up in the second row sooner rather than later. Number 20, moving up 4 spots from last week, Minnesota. For Minnesota, the 1-0 victory over Seattle was important after the 4-0 loss they suffered against Seattle before that. It wasn't the prettiest of hockey, but they won it. And so for Minnesota, they're keeping that mediocre record going too. But again, in the West, mediocre record could very well get you into a playoff spot now. And then you get hot, and then through the rest of the season, you may not have to worry about it. Minnesota should be good enough for the playoffs. Should be. We'll see if they are, but they should be. Number 19, dropping 2 spots from last week, the Red Wings. So every year, it's the same debate about whether or not I hold the Red Wings down. It's not that I hold the Red Wings down, it's that when they're bad, they're really quite shockingly off this year. Like, it's not just that they lose a game here and then, maybe 3-2, or like tonight they lose 4-3. That's respectable. But some of their losses have been really ugly, right? The loss against the Rangers was an ugly one. So they do win their share of games. They're still, 7-5-3, but that means they've won 7 out of 15 as well. So again, you can look at that and say, well, they're above 500, but I look at that and say they've won 7 out of 15 games. And so we'll see how it goes the rest of the way for them. Once they get Bertuzzi back, it's possible to go on a bit of a run. Number 18, dropping 8 spots from last week, Calgary. For the Flames, the 7-game losing streak is over. That prevented them from moving further down. We shall see if they're able to get some momentum going with that win over Winnipeg. They're too good of a team to just sit in a losing streak and just keep losing and losing. And getting Tanev back helps. If they get Shillington back, that would help. Honestly, their blue line, having 3 of their top 6 guys out, did not help situation any. But having Tanev back definitely seemed to make a big difference tonight. So we will see if Calgary ends up in the top 2 rows next week. It's possible. Number 17, moving up 5 spots from last week, is Pittsburgh. The Penguins seem to be getting it back together. That being said, they did lose against Montreal tonight, but I did not move them down because of that loss against Montreal. I felt like it was more of an indicator that Montreal has a pretty good game plan against Pittsburgh. This is the second straight victory they've had over Pittsburgh. So they either have a book on them or it's a bad matchup for Pittsburgh. So I'm giving them a bit of a benefit of the doubt. Again, did not move them down as a result of that. And they're 17th and probably headed for the top 2 rows. I still think Pittsburgh makes the playoffs. I'd be kind of surprised if they don't. Number 16, dropping 4 spots from last week. And now I don't know what to make of the Rangers. Like the Rangers, one week they're really good, and then the next week, meh. And LA have had this same problem where they're good, they're bad. Now LA seems to have gotten it together. The Rangers, not so much. The Rangers power play doesn't click tonight in Nashville. They end up losing that game 2-1. And it's just, and that's after an 8-2 win over Detroit. So which one's the real Rangers? No idea, but they fall back a bit this week. Number 15, moving up 5 spots from last week, those LA Kings. This is an old puck that I got. I ordered a whole set of pucks. This is like a 1980s era puck. So it is a little beat up because it's from the 80s. That's what happens. I'm actually surprised that a lot of the pucks that I got in that set were actually in very good condition. So the Kings move up 5 spots. They get the win over Detroit tonight. I thought, yeah, they're playing well enough. They should be in the top 2 rows. They're one of the top 3 teams right now in the Pacific. And that's where we expected them to be before the season started. So they've kind of ended up where we expected. Just it was a bizarre road to get there. So they're number 15. Number 14, moving up 2 spots from last week, is Philly. I do get a chuckle, too, because whenever I have Philly higher up on the board, people are like, I can't believe my team's below the Flyers. Yeah, I can't believe teams are behind the Flyers either, but here we are. The Flyers have played well, and Hart's been quite the story. I think Hart is saving their bacon at this point, but they're in a playoff spot right now. We'll see if they keep it. But yeah, Philadelphia, I think's been good. It may end up being Philadelphia and Pittsburgh fighting it out for that final playoff spot. And maybe that's how it works out in the East. No idea. I'm really glad that we're not seeing that huge separation we saw early last season, where the top 8 in the East and the bottom 8 in the East were just widely separated, and you could tell who was going to make it and who wasn't. I'm glad we're not seeing that this year. Number 13, moving up 5 spots from last week, is Seattle. So the 5-game winning streak drags Seattle up the board. They're playing well. And even in that loss that ended the winning streak against Minnesota, that was very much Seattle hockey now. Low opportunity for both teams. Not a lot of shots for either team. A lot of shot blocking, solid defensive structure. I don't know if it's Hackstall that's brought this in to try to get things under control or if it's one of the assistants, but it's working. It's working for Seattle, and right now they look like they could be a playoff team. And I've seen, and I mentioned this in a video earlier today, pundits, your journalist type saying, oh no, they're not for real, they're not going to make it. And I understand why people would say that if they're not watching every game, and having watched each game, I think they're full value. I think they've been pretty good. Now, can they keep it up? That, of course, is the question, but I'm not ruling it out. I'm not going to snarkily laugh them off because I think Seattle does have a chance. If they can stick with this system, I think they have a chance. Number 12, moving up 3 spots from last week, Florida. So the Florida Panthers seem to be getting their act back together as well. I would be very surprised if Florida's not a playoff team at the end of the year. They did win the President's Trophy. I'm pretty sure that a team that wins President's Trophy has missed the playoffs in the following season. I can't remember which one, but I know if Stanley Cup finalists and Stanley Cup champs have missed the playoffs the year after, President's Trophy winner would have had to as well, right? That might be worth looking up. Anyways, Florida moves back up. They're in 12th spot now, and I did that despite them losing today against the Oilers, because I think the Oilers were due for a game like that. They had to have that bounce back game, which is good because the Oilers are down 5 spots to number 11. So this was the fun thing coming into today, was that the Oilers were at 11th. Florida was 12th, and I said, all right, so if Florida beats Edmonton, I can just switch them. Cool. And Florida didn't beat Edmonton, so they stay where they are. And yeah, Edmonton, I still think they're going to be able to pull this off. I do wonder if Skinner's going to remain good enough for them to stay in the playoff picture and maybe end up top three if Seattle or LA falters. I don't think Vegas is going to falter that badly. But if Skinner ends up not having that longevity and if Campbell still struggles, they're going to have to figure out a goaltending issue, figure out how to fix that because you can't waste a year with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You just can't. Number 10, moving up one spot from last week, is Toronto. They've been inconsistent, yes. Did they go down 2-0 against Vancouver? Well, of course, because Vancouver likes 2-0 leads, so they can blow it. Toronto comes back, they win that. Toronto had a good week, and so yeah, Toronto ends up 10th on the board this week, and I don't see any reason why they won't be a playoff team either. That being said, at number 9, moving up 4 spots from last week, is Tampa. Now they lost last night against against Washington. And that was a big win for the Caps, sure. I thought that was a big win for the Caps. I also didn't feel like I should all of a sudden drop the Lightning down for that. I think the Lightning are playing relatively well. I'm willing to look at that one and say, I'll treat that like it's a one-off. We'll see in tomorrow's rematch whether or not it's a pattern. If Washington can defeat Tampa tomorrow, then I'd have to reconsider Tampa Bay's positioning, which of course you guys don't see. You guys don't see from day to day. Because once Sunday night's come and gone, the power rankings have changed. So by the time Monday rolls around and people are complaining about where teams are, I'm ignoring it because they're not in those spots anymore. Teams have moved by the time Monday rolls around. So yeah, number 9 is Tampa Bay. We're now into the top row. Number 8, dropping 4 spots from last week, is Dallas. I have some concerns with Dallas. Now, Jamie Benn's playing the best hockey he has in years, and they've still got their top line rolling. But I still have some concerns. That loss against San Jose was absolutely a bit of an alarm for me. And that's after the loss against Winnipeg as well. So right now, Dallas, a team that prides themselves on their defensive game. The defensive game doesn't seem to be up to par right now. Of course, it was Ottinger's first game back, too, last night. So I'll give him a little bit of a break, and hopefully this isn't a sign of a pattern with the Dallas Stars that's emerging. Hopefully not. Number 7 on the board. Moving up 1 spot from last week, New York Islanders. So for the New York Islanders, good week for them. They do finish it out with an overtime win over Columbus. You guys can see that, right? If people ask in the comments, just say that's the Islanders. You skip to the end. So I'll go ahead. I'll take it out again. I'll show it to the camera. There you go. New York Islanders. And I'll put it right there. Or I guess I could turn the light off. Yeah, what the heck. You guys can see the difference between with the light on and the light off. And see, now there's a shadow. So there you go. So number 7 is the New York Islanders. It still doesn't show up that well, does it? Because there's the light in the ceiling. I'm not turning all the lights out. It's not happening. I don't have like a really cool black light, and I can't make the pucks glow in the dark. I wish I could. If I could do an entire power rankings in the dark with glow-in-the-dark pucks, I would be all over that. That would be great. And then I could say somebody else did it. I wasn't actually in the room. Number 6, moving up 3 spots from last week, Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Jets move up to 6th spot. They had a good week. Yes, they lost against Calgary tonight, but they had a good week, and teams are allowed to have a bit of an off night after having a pretty good week. So for the Jets, the win over Dallas I thought was impressive, and so, yeah, they end up at 6th for the week. Number 5, dropping 2 spots from last week to 5, is Carolina. So I also heard the conversation about Carolina and Stanley Cup Final. I keep hearing this a lot about Carolina, but I do have some concerns with Carolina. There's some inconsistency there. And there's always the idea of, what if they don't win their division? What if the Islanders end up winning the division? Right? What if somebody else wins that division other than... What if Philadelphia somehow, some way ends up winning the division? What if the Rangers, Pittsburgh, somebody gets it together? So I don't think Carolina's running away with things, which they should be when you look at the records of other teams in the division. And so, yeah, I think there's some concerns. And they just got flat out beat by Colorado tonight. So number 4 on the board, moving up 10 spots from last week, Colorado. I think they're back. I think the Colorado Avalanche right now are back to being the Colorado Avalanche that we know, right? The Stanley Cup champions. I think the Stanley Cup hangover, if that's what it is, or what it was, I think it's done. I don't think there's a hangover left. I think this is the Colorado Avalanche, and that win over Carolina was just fantastic. And that's after they had another win earlier in the week, and of course they won the games overseas, and they've got it going on. They've won 4 in a row, and I think they're looking like the Avs again. So that's why they made the jump up the board they did. Number 3, moving up 1 spot from last week, the New Jersey Devils. They're on a 9-game winning streak. They are on the verge of 10, right? And for New Jersey, it does feel like this is for real. So for the New Jersey Devils, there was some conversation about whether or not they might be in the hunt, and the expectation was Ottawa would be in the hunt. Detroit would be in there, and the Buffalo could very well get better. And here we are with the New Jersey Devils being the one that's getting all the headlines with 9 straight wins. They're now 12-3. Fantastic run for the Devils. They're bona fide number 3 on the board, and I wouldn't be surprised if they move up. Number 2 on the board, dropping 1 spot from last week. Vegas is no longer in first. The Vegas Golden Knights dropped 1 spot. They did lose against St. Louis. What caused me to drop them is this. There's been a number of occasions this year where they've needed a big third period to win it, or a big third period to tie it and drive it into overtime. And tonight, that caught up with them. They ran into a goaltender that stopped all their shots. And so I want to see that full 60 minutes from Vegas a little more often than we've seen it lately, but they're still number 2 on the board, which means number 1 on the board, moving up 1 spot, Boston. I'm always conflicted. When I have Boston number 1 on the board. Now, they're 13-2, so I shouldn't be conflicted, but I'm going to be honest with Boston, too. I do have some concerns about their ability to play the full 60 minutes, but they don't normally need the third period comeback. And so Boston, I have them in first, but Boston and Vegas have been 1-2. This is the 3rd straight week. Yep, 3rd straight week that they've been 1-2. To start the season, Florida and Colorado were 1-2, and now they're 4-12. So there's the possibility Colorado ends up in one of the top 2 spots soon enough. But there you go. There's the power rankings. And it is rare that Boston's number 1 on the board. I don't think they've been number 1 on the board since the 2019-2020 season. I don't think they were number 1 during the 2020-2021 season. And I don't think they had number 1 spot last year. And there was a point when I started out with the power rankings the first year, I'd actually apologize for Boston being first. Because people know I cheer for Boston. But considering Dallas drops 4 spots and Vancouver's 31st out of 32 teams, I think I can be okay with having Boston in first place. And I am very tough on Boston too. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Remember, this is the Islanders. I may not use that puck again. I like this one. This one was actually sent to me by a subscriber. And I like the puck. But as soon as it moves away from the camera and as soon as light hits it, yeah, that logo disappears. So, yeah, you won't see it again in the power rankings, but I wanted to use it. I just wanted to use it tonight. There you go. Thank you guys again for all your support. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to you again soon.